Nurses of psych wards, what did a patient do that left you speechless? We had a psych patient on our floor that wasn't really crazy, just really confused and unpleasant in general. One night I was mixing his drink with some thickener, and per usual he started yelling about me poisoning him. I explained what it was and that we're all here to help him, not hurt him, and he responds with, "I'm just going to die." His vitals were fine, he was alert, no red flags, and like I said, he was always pretty unpleasant, so I didn't think much of it. Sure as shit, he coded an hour later and we never got him back. When I was in nursing school I had a clinical in the state-funded psych ward downtown. I was assigned to sit with this one girl to monitor her behavior. She spent about 30 minutes doing nothing but eating pudding cups with a plastic spoon. She ate like 6 of them in half an hour. Then out of nowhere she very calmly licked her spoon completely clean and pulled her shirt sleeve up before shoving the entire spoon into an incision in her arm near her bicep. Then very calmly said, "Oops." The nurses that worked there didn't believe me. They kept saying I was making it up and that I couldn't have seen what I saw. Only later on, like 4 hours later, it was a 12 hours clinical, the orderly noticed the girl had some blood on her shirt. He took her into her room to change her clothes and noticed that an incision on her arm had dehisced and had been bleeding. Then eventually agreed to send her to the hospital for testing. The X-ray showed the entire spoon, sucked into the fat of her upper arm, through an incision where they'd removed a birth control implant in the week before. Apparently the girl had slowly been picking at the sutures and opening it bit by bit until it was deep enough to fit an entire plastic spoon. The girl admitted that the oops was because it had gotten sucked in and couldn't be pulled out, not because she stuck a spoon in her arm. Totally bizarre. Not me, but someone I knew was in a ward with a girl who wanted to be a vampire and drank blood from her own tampons. It's as atrocious as it sounds. She was around 16 and schizophrenic. Psych ward counselor here. Early in my career I had a teenage girl with suicidal ideations and severe depression. The year before, on Thanksgiving, her dad pulled a gun from under the dinner table and blew his brains out in front of everyone. I normally form a response pretty quickly, even a wow, but when she told me I got quiet, leaned back, exhaled, and had to gather my thoughts. We had a psychopathic rapist with reinforced illusions of grandeur. He was obsessed with a female nurse, convinced that she fancied him back, but her job prevented them from being together. When told that this wasn't the case, he thought that the male nurses fancied her and were jealous of him and that the female nurses wanted him for themselves. He would try to seek her out alone, once tried to lure her to his room where he had a barricade waiting to block them in while he raped her. He admitted this, but insisted that it would have been consensual. That failed, so then he tried to get her fired instead with accusations. He bit himself and scratched his back, blaming her for them. The idea of that guy getting out still terrifies me. He has no remorse about any of his past crimes and basically thinks that the victims were lucky that he abused them. Not me, but my dad used to work in Airedale and J Ward, Australian insane asylum and prison for the criminally insane, respectively, in the 70s. He used to talk about sunny days in J Ward where they'd bring out all the inmates during a sunny day and they'd promptly line up and start jacking off. In Airedale they deal with the jacking off problem by strapping you into cotton mittens, but a lot of the inmates would chew a hole through them just to get a finger out to jack off with. His worst story was about a psychotic woman in Airedale. She had self-inflicted scars all over her face from scratching herself, self-imposed bite marks all over her body from trying to eat herself, and she had the nasty habit of chewing the inside of her mouth and spitting blood at your eyes and mouth hoping you'd catch one of the myriad of diseases she carried. A nurse told me one of her patients killed himself on the unit while on one-to-one suicide watch. Edit, patent and staff were at arm's length and patient suddenly charged the wall, smashing his head as hard as he could, breaking his neck in the process. Not a nurse but have had several stays on psychiatric wards for bipolar. To be fair, on most occasions, I didn't enter the wards in the most rational and stable state myself, but what has tended to happen is that even when they bring you back down to earth, you can end up staying for an extra month or two before they let you go. So I have spent some time on psychiatric wards completely sane, if not maybe firing on all cylinders. Anyway, I have seen a few shocking things, like a guy cutting open his wrists with broken glass and bleeding out pretty severely, but TBH, you quickly become desensitized. What tended to leave me speechless was the abruptness of certain behavior and its total incongruence with facial expressions, etc. For example, sitting watching a TV when a 5-foot-tall 7-stone woman calmly walks over, suddenly lifts the TV up and throws it into the wall with great force, smashing it to bits, and then calmly sits back down in an armchair declaring that the TV was ruining her painting. She wasn't painting, by making the armchair give her an orgasm. She never even raised her voice. She then immediately asked me, as if it was somehow related, if I like Lisa Stansfield. Not a nurse, pharmacist. Had one of our clozapine patients miss a monthly meeting to discuss their medication. Called around, found out she was in the ICU having eaten 2 of her own fingers, then visited her mother for coffee, still bleeding. Had a friend tell me of another patient, made a cut in his thigh and reopened it regularly until the whole thing was a scar tissue cavern, by some miracle avoiding infection. Started using his meat pocket to hold pens and coins and anything he could collect in his ward. Nobody knew until a paperclip pierced the side and he finally wound up with an infection that took him to ICU, where they found his stash. I'm not a nurse but was a patient once. Giant dude got upset. One dude changed the channel from a football game he was watching and smashed his skull with his fists. Not fully, but enough that when they brought him back a few days later he started seizing and had to be removed again. Didn't see him again. Also, there was one lady who was straight out of the movies. Walking around preaching the end of days loudly and sweating like crazy. That's the end of today's Reddit video. To watch more videos just like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe.